It started already, right?
Hey, welcome everyone. We are about to start our first live session of the 17th edition of the Social Entrepreneurship for Innovations in Health course. We are going to wait for a few seconds for everybody to join us today. While we're waiting, I would like to share that we have over 400 participants enrolled in this course, and they're coming from close to 50 countries of the world. It's a very diverse community. Participants are coming from private, public, and nonprofit sectors. So in that sense, I would really like to encourage the participants to connect with each other through the platform and in discussion forums, because we have seen really interesting collaborations happening in the past. Also, I would like to remind everybody that if you're watching us live, to please scroll down and click yes to the survey that you're watching live so you can receive the extra points. You're going to need about 100 points to complete the course and earn your certificate. Okay, so welcome everyone to our first live session of the Social Entrepreneurship for Innovations in Health course. This course, as you all know, is a partnership between Ashoka Changemakers and Boehringer Ingelheim. And it is part of the Making More Health initiative. The Making More Health initiative, it's an initiative that explores innovative pathways to improve access to healthcare for people, animals, and communities around the world. My name is Nathalie Zuniga, and I'm going to be the facilitator of this live webinar today. And it's an honor to have here with me Dr. Beatrice Murage. Dr. Beatrice Murage is a leader with experience in health systems strengthening, health equity strategy, entrepreneurship, intrapreneurship, and digital innovation. She's currently Global Senior Manager of Group Sustainability, ESG, at Philips International. And she's based in Amsterdam, Netherlands. Dr. Murage is also board-certified medical doctor with an international MBA, Master in Business Analytics and Big Data and Project Management Professional certification. Welcome, Dr. Beatrice. So happy to have you here with us.
Thank you so much, Natalie. I think you could just call me Beatrice. That should be enough for today's session, yeah. And thanks for the invitation.
Sounds great. To start our conversation today, I would love to talk a little bit about your professional journey, your background. Particularly, I'm interested in your development as a leader, bringing social innovations within the institutions that you have worked for. Could you please share a little bit with us?
Absolutely. I've had a bit of an eccentric journey. I've been in healthcare, at least the healthcare vertical, for a bit over 15 years now. Started out as a medical doctor, a practitioner, clinician in Kenya. That's in the east of Africa, for those who don't know on the call. Then I've been in the entrepreneurship journey with a very interesting team. So Savannah Informatics Limited, if you have time, look them up. They do amazing things. And we're just getting to see how you work with, let's say, corporate providers and insurers to be able to smoothen that process of health payments. I've been a bit working with the academic community, just getting to see how we train talent that's coming up and looking mostly at innovation in healthcare. Currently, I'm part of Philips, Royal Philips, the global ESG team, the sustainability team. But I started out within Philips in the innovation and strategy group. We were looking at research and especially looking at innovation and how that impacts healthcare, especially for what we call the underserved communities. With the ecosystem, I also serve on a couple of teams. One of them is Vilgro Africa, where we're looking at impact investments, and I'm part of the advisory board. We worked a bit as a volunteer consultant for Stanford SID and the IFC. So quite a number of organizations looking at this topic of how you innovate, whether you're within a large organization, as the focus will be today, social entrepreneurship, or entrepreneurship, let's say outside, let's say an organization as large as one you have in mind. Within Philips, in the ESG, I sit on the Access to Care team, where we're looking at how to help Philips achieve its corporate goal of improving lives for 2 5.5 billion people by every year by 2030, but more specifically, the 400 million lives that are improved for what we call medically underserved communities across the world in the same year. Yeah, so that's a bit of me in a nutshell. And I know I'd shared a bit of a video in terms of what we do at Philips. And yeah, when you have time, just let's have a quick view of that so that everyone at least is on the same page of what we do within the Access to Care program in Philips.
Perfect. So I'm going to share the video now. Just wait 1 second. Is it? Hey.
Hey, I think we missed out on the sound a bit, but I think the visuals were good. Yeah, thanks, Nat, for sharing. But I think it's available on YouTube. I mean, if you can just quickly put a link in the chat and everyone can just get to listen to it sometime later.
Yes. Sorry, 1 second. Something happened here. Okay. Okay. Do you listen to me now, though?
Yes, I hear you. Great.
Okay, perfect. I don't know what happened with that sound for the video. It was just music, though. So it was no speaking. Yeah. Great. So thank you so much for sharing that video of the work that you're doing currently at Philips right now. So to start the conversation about social entrepreneurship, I would love to hear from you if you consider yourself a social entrepreneur. And if you do, what does it mean to you?
I think we like to be people who try to look for ways of making things work a bit better. Conversation is really a bigger conversation about innovation, and we have buzzwords. We have entrepreneurship. I think for the sake of the audience and the purpose of the call is that you're looking at how you innovate or how you help solve problems a bit more, in an ingenious manner, mostly within a large organization. So that's because that is the core of what I do, at least within Philips at the moment. So yes, I'd say I would consider myself part of a social entrepreneurship movement, and let's say what it is that we do within the company. I think sometimes you have that as something that's in your title, but if that's an approach, I like to look at it as a mindset. If you're especially in any large organization in today's world, the ecosystem is changing. What clients want and what customers want are also changing. What suppliers want, because I'm part of the sustainability team that changes. So the fact that you're always having a mindset that's looking at how do we solve this problem in a way that's a bit different, or just improving on what we do today, could be a completely new thing. So that helps you have just a social entrepreneurship mindset that's become a bit more of a mainstream necessity if you work in any large organization. So yes, I would consider myself one.
Perfect. I really love that you were mentioning that really being a social entrepreneur is a mindset.
Yes.
It's just a way of seeing the world, right? And were there other qualities or skills that you would consider would be necessary for a person to be considered a social entrepreneur?
One is just curiosity. You need to maintain a curious way of life, a curious view to life, willingness to question, willingness to listen, when also what you've always done a certain way is question. So you do need to be constantly curious. Yeah. Curious in finding out, especially when you're working within a large organization and you're in the, in the thick of things, or in the hairs of the day-to-day operation. Sometimes you're lucky enough to be at the forefront where you interact with customers and clients directly, but not everybody is, let's say, in a sales or marketing or business development role. So it's very easy to be out of touch with what the customer wants. But if you maintain that curious, mindset that you're always finding out, either you directly go out, keep your curious hat always on. And I'm trying to see, for example, if anyone uses a Philips product or a Philips solution, whether or not I'm in the sales or, let's say, customer facing role, it's always curious to observe how do the people interact with these kinds of products and solutions. What does that mean for patients, for example? What does that mean for our direct customers who would be probably healthcare providers? What does that mean for people who pay? So always being curious to find out how people are interacting, whatever it is that you are trying to solve. Always keen to look at what are people struggling with. Sometimes you have a fantastic idea, what you think is a fantastic product, but when you observe, you see maybe people don't use it for the purpose that you thought it would be used for, or not, it doesn't solve the problem the way you thought it would. So as much as you're observing, it's always being keen that you have the end customers or even the end users' view of the problem in mind, not how you see it. So that curiosity is important. The second thing I'd highlight, I think, is courage. Courage to see what you need to do. Sometimes solving a problem requires a completely different way of doing things. And even the person you're trying to solve the problem for, this is your customer, your end user in mind, or whoever it is that you're trying to solve the problem for, will not always agree with the approach that you're using. Yeah, I'll use a famous example. A couple of years ago, when we got, let's say, a phone, you never really thought you'd have a phone, especially a mobile phone that didn't have buttons to press in terms of being able to solve what you needed. But today, you almost don't remember a time when phones had buttons. But sometimes when you're trying to look for a more innovative or different way of doing things, you need to be courageous to try something new. Sometimes courage looks like keeping what's already there, but trying to improve it in a way that responds better to the needs of the customer. But either way, you just need to be courageous, especially if you're within a large organization. There's legacy to deal with. There's a traditional way of thinking. There's we've always done a certain way, things a certain way kind of thinking. And in some places, like in healthcare, for example, there's a lot of regulatory, and even quality, let's say, red tape to go through. And that's because it has to safeguard the patient safety at the end of the day. So you do need to be courageous in that sense. The third one, which I think will probably go without saying, is content. You do need to know your stuff, for the lack of a better word. If you don't know it today, find a way you are always upskilling. So learning about new things, and sometimes it could be a formal learning, it could be an informal learning, it could be coming on a session like this and getting to hear how other people are doing things. But just, you need to be a lifelong learner. That way you keep your content fresh, you keep it updated. And sometimes it's also bringing new ideas, let's say, to the knowledge body that is within your organization or even within the industry that you're working in, so that then the content is critiqued properly. The content is also brought to accountability, but it's also improved. So that need to always keep an updated view of what's happening is important. So I like to call them the 3 C's. I usually have one more C, but for today's conversation, we'll keep it to the 3 C's, so that you need to be curious, you need to be courageous, and you need to really have content.
I love it. I was actually taking notes about that. And I was going to say it's actually 3 C's: curiosity, courage, and content, which is, I like it because it's very good for people to remember, right?
Yes.
And it really feels like it's totally like a mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that it will be instilled in people. And the second point that you mentioned, courage, is actually related to a point that is a question very often mentioned in throughout these sessions from learners that are participating in the course, because it's related to what you were mentioning about resistance to change. There's a lot of like legacy of ways that things have been done in one way.
Yeah.
Right. So the question would be, what do you see as the business case to engage in and promote entrepreneurial practices? How can an employee can convince and can get buy-in from the leadership to promote entrepreneurship internally?
Yeah. So I don't think there's one business case to respond to the question. So I hear the question is, how do you get to scale the legacy challenge, and how do you get buy-in from leadership? I think in many ways, companies generally have needed to expand their scope from, especially the P&L focused kind of companies like the ones I work for, whereby really for the longest time and in so many ways, sensibly so, that shareholder value is one of the things that needs to be really in the radar of your corporate leadership. But in addition to that, there is something we also call stakeholder value. And stakeholder value goes beyond just, let's say, the P&L bit, and corporates do need to think about what purpose are you tapping into, what are you doing in terms of just improving stakeholder value, because sometimes your shareholders are one group of stakeholders you need to look at. You have your team members, your employees, you have your suppliers, you have, let's say, customers, you have partners that you work with in the ecosystem, you have governments, you have a lot of stakeholders you need to think about. And more when you start thinking about how stakeholder value addition matters also to your shareholder value, then that's becoming less of a need to push the employee needing to push, let's say, the leadership to look at entrepreneurship, or let's say just innovation as a mindset. It's a way to do business. It makes sense to that you can do well by doing good, that you can also do well by having purpose in your work. You also have very conscious, especially on a topic like sustainability and ESG, you have even the talent that's coming onto your organization is very conscious about these things. So even from an executive leadership, it's been a change that has been happening over years. But I'm glad to see we're at a point, a lot of leadership in executive positions within large organizations do see that they need to innovate. And you can see that even from the kinds of teams that they build, from the kinds of things that they're investing in. I think we've come a long way. What we do need still to work on is how you align that bit. What can you do in terms of preparing for the future by innovation, in terms of having entrepreneurship that helps you position whatever it is that you do better in the market, vis-a-vis how do you also not lose what you do well today? Yeah, because there's also a risk that you think I have to change everything at the same time, which is not always the case. There are things that work really well, and you need to find a way how you safeguard that, even as you're trying to figure out what can you do better and how can you even better respond to what's in the market. So I'm saying there's better ownership of this particular topic by leadership, at least at Philips. That's very clear in terms of all the way to calling out very bold, let's say, targets at the corporate level. Like, I mean, when you say you want to improve 2.5 billion lives by 2030, and you even put a subset for 400 million lives for the underserved, that's a big vision. It tells you you're willing to put your money where your mouth is. Now it's trying to see how do you then scale the bureaucracies and let's say the legacies to ensure that your talent, number one, is well skilled to be able to respond as quickly as possible within this context, and then number two, then they're able to do that in a manner that makes sense to add stakeholder value in addition to shareholder value.
Right, perfect. And this is actually related, your answer, to the question that I was going to ask next, which is actually how like decision makers and that leaders within an organization or a company can actually promote an entrepreneurship culture.
Yeah.
And we were saying is basically to increase, it's related with talent.
Yeah.
Right. So that actually talent is actually looking for entrepreneurs from within.
Yeah. Yeah.
Will you add anything else?
So talent, you're building that talent, you're allowing the talent space to grow. That's number one. Number two is you're actually literally investing the money. So for example, Philips invests quite a good portion of its revenues back into research and development. So that means you're looking at how do you do things better, how do you keep innovating, and not just for product or for solution, but in a manner that makes sense also for the customers and the end users eventually. So you do need to actually invest money, build teams around it.
Right.
It also means that you're also looking at how you contribute to the knowledge of innovation, whether it's within the company or in industry, by what we call, let's say, knowledge works. So if you find examples that Philips does allow its employees, for example, the Philips Foundation works with quite a number of social entrepreneurs, and the main Philips then will just allow its employees to volunteer time, because sometimes what your entrepreneurs need to do is to understand how do certain business scenarios look like. What does it mean to, let's say, interact with a large corporate? Maybe sometimes it's advice on the business case development, for example, or marketing or go-to-market, that even employees within Philips can volunteer that time and be able to mentor entrepreneurs across the world that are working on these kinds of things. So that's a very interesting tie between having entrepreneurship, but also still gives back to the community that's more within the entrepreneurship space, and just getting to see that innovation can be very interestingly circular and helpful for all.
Right. Right. I love it. And since we're talking still about the business case of social entrepreneurship, we actually have a question from the audience. The question from Damilola Aria from Nigeria.
Yes.
And the question is, how to put our ideas into action when we are not quite in any position of power at the company in terms of funding and resources, which is what you were just mentioning. What are your experiences regarding this? Also, another person, Anju Kambobara from Austria. Same question.
Okay. Let me use my example. So, and I'll use an example, not at Philips, because I think Philips has sort of spoils me in that sense, that you do have a place that you will find, I'm smack in an innovation and strategy environment, so to speak. But I'll give an example when I worked for a government, a government scenario, very hardcore, very specific, and in a government, even in an environment that things are very, it's really cut to fit. There's a way things work, and it's very strict in that sense. And what helped there was something I'd add a 4C, and that's consistency. Consistency in being able to communicate that this is important, and consistency in terms of being able to demonstrate some results. Sometimes you have within what is your area of influence. Like for then, I was a clinical practitioner then, and we're trying to see. So we have this issue in terms of how we provide care. Their budget limitations, of course, their priority limitations, of course. But where I was able to actually run a bit of a screening program, that one didn't cost the organization so much money then, I was able to demonstrate that then you have patients that are happier with the kind of care that you give. But more importantly, it also gives you a sort of a good visibility as the organization to give lead. So sometimes if you're able to find how you align interests initially by just demonstrating some small wins, and sometimes that means it's extra outside of what is your regular JD, but where there's low risk, but there's potential to demonstrate that something can change, and consistently do that, then that helps you break some of those barriers. And then, of course, there's a place that does require that endorsement. When you look at any organization, you will find one or two or three people who have a lot of influence, even with leadership. Maybe that's not you directly, but someone who sees the world the way you do, that someone who understands this innovation path the way you do. It's important to get that kind of, let's say, sponsorship within the organization. But at the end of the day, you need to consistently, at least at the beginning, demonstrate that this is possible and it actually adds value. Then as that courage is growing, because the nature of innovation is that sometimes you will fail, is that then you have a bit more tolerance for the things that you try and they fail, of course, without bringing harm to lives. And then, yeah, start slowly creating a culture. A culture is really about consistency. It's something that's done over and over and over again, over many generations until it becomes a norm. And it's usually the tough part is to start it. But once it starts to entrench over time, and people like things that work, then yeah, then you start slowly shifting the culture, which takes a while.
I love the example that you just gave us, because I think it's very clear, and like a governmental institution is like very rigid, as you were saying. And I really like that you were saying it's consistency, but also like piloting it yourself, which will require a lot of times, unfortunately, time extra that is out of your job description, that you just have to spend more time involved in it. But you're like testing your idea, demonstrating it, showing results, and then finding a sponsor, somebody that actually is aligned with you and has a little bit more of position of power that can help you leverage and gain that buy-in from like the leadership position. And as you're saying, it's a process, little by little.
But the best part is if you get to a point that it works so well that it's your customers or your clients that start demanding for it, then you have to respond to it as a business or you will be irrelevant.
Totally agree. Thank you so much for that example. I have another question that is also related with a question from Angelina from Kenya. And is if you can share some other examples of products and services that are a result of social entrepreneurship.
Oh, wow. I know we have a second video, Natalie. It's really long. But so one of the things that you've seen in the video, at least within for Philips, there's something we call a handheld ultrasound. It's called Lumify. So Lumify was actually born out of what we call an environment that served medically underserved people. And it would traditionally really play as Philips in card-based ultrasound for the longest time, very high-end, very premium kind of things. But because of that interaction with, let's say, what we call the medically underserved communities, getting to understand what the need was, we came up with a handheld ultrasound that has allowed us to be able to increase access to those kinds of scanning services, even pre or even before you hit an ER or a hospital. And then it scaled not just within what we call the low middle income country segments, but it became a global hit because it served a purpose and it solved a problem. It was so much easier, whether it was for your emergency, let's say physician or your obs-gyn or anyone or just your sonographer, to be able to have an ultrasound you can literally carry in your pocket and walk around with you. So it didn't seem like it was a big thing. It doesn't seem like a big thing now, but then it was really cutting edge because nobody had really thought that you would take an ultrasound outside of a cart or a laptop based and make it a bit more accessible in that sense. So that's just one example. The Philips Foundation and works with quite a community of what we call social entrepreneurs in terms of getting to see how do you also marry what Philips does as the core business. The foundation is a separate entity, and what people are doing in the ecosystem in terms of bringing more solutions to people. And we also have the Philips Ventures that's also looking at what are people doing in the ecosystem that makes sense for us to invest. Quite a lot of examples. We just highlighted a few in the video that came up, but when you have some time, just look up what the Philips Foundation also does on their website. Yeah.
Perfect. I have another question here from the audience, from Hilda Graves from the US. The question is, how can companies work with governments or local leaders to make their initiatives sustainable long-term? What is your experience on that, or some of the best practices that you know?
We work quite closely with companies, other companies actually, communities, all the way to the community level, and with governments. I mean, Philips is an entity that does have to interact with government. One, because governments are also a huge client for Philips in terms of being custodians of healthcare. So they will buy these solutions in terms of also providing better access to healthcare for their populations. So it depends on what kind of stakeholder you're working with. I mean, governments have very specific ways that they interact, let's say with corporates like Philips. They have different ways they'll interact, let's say with the small and middle-sized enterprises. So they do have, let's say, rules and regulations, of course, to ensure also that the ethics are within compliance as well. So there are ways of engagement that are in place. So it's just ensuring that that happens and getting to work with the right kind of people within the governments, because the tricky part is usually how you navigate within the agencies. But then there's a bit that you do at the government level, but then you also need to see at the actual place where you do deliver the care. At the health provider level, is ensuring that there's also that engagement and understanding and being able to work with healthcare providers to see that whatever it is that we do as Philips gets, that vision is met, that you are improving lives and in some cases even saving them. When you're looking at communities, we do co-create quite closely, at least in our research and development premise, so to speak, or our innovation hat. I'll give one example. So we're teaming up quite closely with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to innovate around increasing access to obstetric scanning services, whether it's screening or scanning, in places, especially, you barely have these kinds of access in low middle income countries. So in that case, you do have to team up with the ministries of health in these countries so that you understand what are the policy, let's say, guidelines that you need to adhere to. What can you do if what it is that you're planning to do innovation looks like it might need to adjust the way we do things? You always need to have the ministries of health or the governments there to be able to give you guidelines to ensure that the population's health is actually protected in that sense. Then you also have to work quite keenly with end users that you're developing this solution for, to ensure that their thoughts and their input is considered, that when you're building something, it's very much in touch with the problems and the needs that are and the pains that are on ground. And then you see how you take it back after it's built. So through programs, through, let's say, agreements, if I was to really get down to the details of how we partner, that's how. But then always being very keen that you design things that allow those kinds of stakeholders to be part of the process, either very closely, or you keep them informed or engaged in some way or another.
Perfect. Yes, it's very important to just involve the whole ecosystem, as you were saying. Like, so every stakeholder that is part of the problem, so that they can be part of the real solution.
Exactly.
Totally. Yeah. I have just been informed that we have over 120 people watching us live right now. So
thank you for making time.
I just wanted to share that with you. We have more questions coming up. This question,
please ask them.
Yes, Antonio from Israel, and is, what are the most common challenges social entrepreneurs face in their journeys, and how do you overcome them?
I'll always speak from my experience. I'll not speak for everyone else. I think when you work in a big corporate, and especially that's also a P&L focused corporate, it's also getting to see, does the business case make sense? Okay, what's a business case looking like? Is it sustainable financially? Because we don't want to start things, pilot things, and then leave. We want something that is sustainable. So one of the things is trying to find business cases and business models that work. And in that sense, we end up teaming quite closely with the kind of potential customers we'll work with even social entrepreneurs, for example, to find business models that work. Yeah, or that could probably be more sustainable for the context that you're looking at. If you're looking at, let's say, high income sort of customers, then the business case becomes, I think, less of a hurdle, because sometimes you have a customer that's willing to pay however much it takes. It's now looking at how do you do that in a way that's efficient, that you're also not wasteful in terms of the kind of solutions that you're building, but then it's also, again, still sustainable over time. It's nimble. And when you're looking at sustainability, it's other elements of sustainability as well. I think that's becoming more important for Philips, the energy consumptions for this kinds of things, what are the environmental impact and things like that. So it's trying to, number one, understand the kind of customer we are innovating with and innovating for, what they're willing to invest, and what are the trade-offs for them. So trying to find the balance always is usually the tricky part. And you try and you start somewhere, and then you figure out how you make it work. And especially for such a global organization that has a very diverse set of customers, how do you also balance such that there is value? There's value for your customer that has a bit more purchasing power, but there's also value for a customer that probably is a bit more, let's say, affordability sensitive in that sense.
Right. Yes, and I can see how like making that balance in between value for every stakeholder is really important, and to make it sustainable. Exactly. In order for you to be sustainable, it has to be financially sustainable.
Exactly.
And that's how we pilot things and we test them out. And we will see that in the next few modules about piloting and prototyping early on, so that we are not wasting the resources. So,
I think we also try not to be what a couple of people call pilotitis, that you're not always in a state of piloting things, that you never scale them. So it's important that even when you're piloting, even when you're solving, you're innovating, you have scale in mind. And even from before you even start your pilot, that you have skill as an end goal. Otherwise, you start things and you keep ending them. And sometimes that is as a result of the learnings that you do pick. But I think sometimes we could avoid that if we had a bit more of a sustainable lens in mind from the beginning.
Perfect. Thank you for the advice. Another common challenge that I have heard through the course has been a lot of times working in institutions or even corporations that they do not have an entrepreneurship culture. That is more of like going against the resistance to change from the leadership. But as we've just spoken about, it's really a process, and it's really about like keep doing it, right? Like innovate, demonstrate the results, convince leaders, and just you start creating that culture of entrepreneurship. Can you share with us today, Beatrice, any best practices or business trends in social entrepreneurship that you have seen?
Yeah. Like I said, create with the end in mind, and end here being a scalable end in mind. That when you start grapple with the idea. It's easy to pick something and let's take it. I'm a fan of let's fail fast, let's fail forward, let's try, but also have a scalable end in mind. Okay. And then you're able to focus, at least if I see scale, sometimes you get lucky. Things you didn't even imagine would scale, they do just surprise you. And sometimes the things you thought would scale never do, but at least create a habit that you have a scalable end in mind from the beginning. That's important. Number two, it's important to co-create with, let's say, your key stakeholders. So don't tinker just away on your own in silence and then, I have come up with something that will come and test it. So co-create means, like I said, be curious. Sometimes it's observe and you can see that maybe this is actually a problem, or maybe this is something people are trying to sort. More often than not, we try find an alternative or some organic way we try and solve problems that are important for us. Is just trying to see, can we make this more efficient? Can we make this sustainable? Would people pay for this, for example? Because then if they're able to pay for this and it's valuable, then it doesn't need to depend on someone else paying for it. They can sustain it over time, no matter who provides it. So you need to co-create, right from just understanding what are the needs to starting to see what a solution could look like, or even how responding to that need could be, to the testing, to the development of the solution, all the way to the end. So that entire process, however, whatever process you want to use, I mean, there's so many methodologies. You need to co-create with your key stakeholders, and especially your end customer in mind, or your end user. Yeah. So your end user could be your customer and your end users could be different. Yeah. The third thing is, I don't know how to put it. Advocate. Either you do that advocating yourself, or you find someone who is very influential within your organization that does that advocacy Sometimes we have fantastic ideas, etc, etc, but if it's not a priority, because when you're looking at an organization, you always have competing priorities. So if there's a way someone can advocate for it and help you communicate it in a way that what you're doing to solve this, and in a way that customers also would respond, also ties in with organizational priorities and where it is that they want to go, then you're less likely to have too much, let's say, too many barriers in your way there. So you do need that kind of advocating, whether it's yourself or with a team lead, or with someone who's that influential. That's important. The advocacy is important. And then at the end of the day, it needs to be sustainable. Find a way, or find where you want to solve this problem in a manner that's sustainable. And when you're looking at working within an organization that's really for profit, sustainability looks like also financial sustainability. If you're looking at non-profit, there are other elements that they look at in terms of sustainability that are important for them. If you're looking at, let's say, and this actually matters whether it's for profit or non-profit, that it's socially sustainable. Somehow it also has a sense of environmental sustainability, because that's just a general topic that everyone in the ecosystem is a bit more sensitive about. But those are things that I think are important to be able to have it. And the last one, always keep upskilling, keep learning. Like I said, a lifelong learner mindset for you, for the teams that you lead, because I'm sure we have a couple of team leaders on this call as well, that people are encouraged to be learning. So whether it's formal or on-the-job training, or being able to bring people in a community whereby you're able to share this knowledge consistently, that we have lifelong learning as a way of life. That's important.
I love it. Thank you so much, Beatrice. I feel like it's really amazing advice that you have been giving us. I have another, it's a question that several people are actually mentioning. Okay. And before going to the question, I do want to share with you that your responses have been like really triggering a lot of responses from the audience. They're like really excited about it, and they're like having a lot of reflections that are being shared, and I will share that with you later. But the question now is, we know that one sole individual cannot really bring systemic change. Social problems are way too complex. What is your advice on building a network of innovators around you, champions and ambassadors that will walk with you during your journey?
I kind of disagree that one individual cannot bring change.
Okay. Yeah.
Number one, I don't fully agree. I think let's say one individual cannot bring change alone. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But essentially, change is many individuals who want to go somewhere. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So as they go there, but then they bring in the power of network, that you have many individuals coming together to go somewhere. So in that sense, you as an individual, you need to have that clear view in terms of where do you want to go. So that motivation, because sometimes entirely relying on the energy and the motivation of a group might not be very advisable, because sometimes our energies change and our motivations change. So yours also needs to be there for you, and to also encourage other parts of the network when, let's say, they're a bit on the lower end in terms of motivation and energy. It's important to build a network, not just for networking value, but like you said, a system is a system. By definition, it's not one part, it's very many components. And in that sense, different people contribute to those elements that are part of a system. So, and especially when you look at healthcare, because I work in healthcare, I'm very passionate to say healthcare is a system strengthening. And let's say, for example, as Philips, we recognize putting one device in the hands of one clinician is not enough to impact change. Is that you need to be able to look at how do you enable this clinician to be able to do that. You have patients to look at. Even just looking at your problem is already a network of a problem. So for you to be able to solve that, you do need to work with others to be able to get that done. One of the things, at least we do within the Access to Care program, is we facilitate very deliberately something we call the Digital Connected Care Coalition, whereby you're able to bring different kinds of players that are looking at digital health and how we can do this together in terms of strengthening the healthcare system. So you do need, number one, to pull you in your weight, so to speak, like just do your part, do it well, show up well. Yeah, because your network is only as strong as the individuals who are part of it. And then as a network, get to see what is our objective. I think it's also very important to clearly define what's our objective of coming together. What goal are we looking to achieve? Be able to see what are the steps we need to get there, who owns what part of those steps, and then in that ownership, like we said, show up as your best self. But the tricky part is always aligning the interests, because I'm thinking, even myself as Beatrice, before I join any network, what's in it for me? Yeah, I know what I want to bring to this system, and then someone else will also have the same thought. So it's being very clear, what's the objective of this network? What do we have to offer? What's in it for the members of this network? Because in that sense, then they feel there's value for their time and their effort in a way that also promotes, let's say, the social impact goal that you're looking to achieve, along with the business goals as well.
Perfect. I really like that you were like very clear of like, first do your part. You are an individual, do have power. And then when you get together with others, it's all about sharing a vision. Exactly. What is the objective of getting together? Like just aligning the visions and aligning the values of the work. It's really important. It's probably, as you were saying, what takes the longest to align. And defining the steps, the roles, who's responsible of what. That would be like the following steps.
This is a famous saying that says, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go with others. I think I'm trying to look at the situation. Does this situation require that you go fast? Then maybe it might be faster for you to be able to do this alone or fewer. If you want to be able to create, like you said, a systemic change, now that's a journey over time. Then you do need to come alongside with a couple of others. And always remembering, even in terms of adopting innovation, whether it's in the culture or in solution, there's always a curve. Yeah, there's always the happy people who are always at very, very early adoption and at the head of that curve, and will always be those kinds of people. Then those guys are like, we're okay to be second or actually at the end of it, if especially the risk is low. But the point is, sometimes it's not one network. Sometimes it's different types of network, different MOs within the networks, and you're getting to see, am I really mostly a bit averse to risk, or a bit more, am I excited when I'm at the risk forefront? And none is wrong. It's just, it depends on where you're comfortable to sit on this curve, and then get to see what you want to do. And sometimes maybe you adopt different MOs depending on what you want to achieve. Yeah.
Perfect. And all of these are also like really important ways to co-create. What you were mentioning about like the importance of co-creation. And this is a theme that we're going to be working actually in module 3 and module 4. Awesome. So we're like a little bit ahead, but I'm glad we're touching into it, because it's very, very important.
It is.
In order to create systemic change, exactly as you were saying. Mm-hmm. I have a question here from Sofia Savage from Sweden. Mm-hmm. And do you have any particular tools, methods, or frameworks that you use to help you co-create or develop successful partnerships, which is related to?
Okay. I'll name one. So Philips has, I think, a cool design team. So Natalie, when you get to co-create, I highly recommend to invite someone from the Philips design team. They are amazing in terms of just understanding user journeys, and they use different tools. I think they would have, a whole list of tools that they could mention in terms of what you're looking at. But sometimes you'll use different charts. You'll actually do your observations. Sometimes you actually have your qualitative and your quantitative research. Sometimes you go all the way to proper clinical study research to be able to get into an environment like that is your clinical traditional research, or you have, let's say, your user research. It depends on what you want to do. And I know you'll have a session on that. There are very many tools. I will highlight one, at least in terms of when you're looking at business cases, because that's the conversation at least you started. When you're looking at new things, Philips, one tool that we use quite a bit is what we call the value proposition canvas. And we're always looking at the customer offer a business case sort of understanding in that element. You have different modes of these similar kinds of tools, like you have, let's say, with your business model canvassing or your lean canvas, for example. So the whole point is that as long as these elements are thought about, who's your customer, your end user, and what's their pains, etc., and what you're trying to solve, and that especially you understand that part before you dive into thinking you're solving the solution, or what do you need to be able to respond to this need in a manner that is sustainable financially or otherwise, then feel free to use whatever tools that you want. But when you get to the actual user journey co-creating, I highly recommend the Philips design team. They make my life so much better and so much more exciting, because I realize even the tools you use, how visually appealing they are, how engaging they are, they actually increase the energy in terms of the process. Yes.
Totally agree with you. Yes, I feel like value proposition canvas is like a really good methodology, a tool to better understand what's in it for each stakeholder, as you were saying, and it's very, very useful. And then, as you were saying at the end too, like the design, right?
Yes.
Like when we are actually trying to actually influence people that are in high decision power, it appeals the emotional part of us a lot of times. Right?
I hear you.
So I feel like that is an important tool for sure. We are human beings, and it's not all about numbers at the end. It also has to do with like the videos and like the whole.
It helps with your advocacy. Helps with your advocacy, because how you package your story and how you tell it. As long as your content is good, sometimes the buck really stops at how do you tell this story, how do you communicate it. So you have design, but then you're seeing even incorporates the growing role of people who've been traditionally in the storytelling space, but how do you package this content and all these things in a manner that makes sense, whether it's the tools that you use, your PowerPoint, etc., but generally what's a story you want to tell, and the more authentic and genuine and as truthful as possible, the more you're actually going to get buy-in, because people can read between the lines as well.
Totally agree with you. And actually, we have another module that we're actually going to be talking about storytelling too. And
great.
Storytelling in order to communicate your message and connect with your audience. And exactly what you were saying about like authentic messages of like based on your own experience and how people can connect with you through stories. Wonderful. So we are getting close to the end, and there are a couple more questions that I would like to ask you. So one question that I would love to talk with you is why we know that social entrepreneurship is and innovation in general are really important in all industries. But why do you think it is so key and urgent in healthcare and wellness?
For the longest time, healthcare was viewed as a social, even before social impact or the buzz thing, was viewed as a social need and a social priority. That had positives, and that also had some challenges. Positives in the sense that even at the government level, you'd need to prioritize how you take care of health. Now, different governments have managed their populations' healthcare differently, some with some success, some still have a way to go. The challenge is that for the longest time, people thought also that should be for free maybe, or there's no associated cost of pricing, which becomes a bit of a challenge if people don't have a culture of paying for their healthcare, or one way having a payment model that works. So I wouldn't say it's become important. It's always been the premise of healthcare. It's just that right now the word social entrepreneurship or social impact is becoming a bit more of a buzzword. But really, if you even ask what was the origin, what were some of the industries that were the origin of these kinds of buzzwords, you have healthcare there, you have agriculture there. And sometimes you'd also have education, at least in my context, and mostly in what you call the global south. Those were three key industries in terms of developing the thought and the thinking around social impact. I think the premise of it is that you need to be able to take care of the population, the social aspects of it, because then it makes good socioeconomic sense. If you have a healthy population as a country, then the expectation is that you have better output generally towards the GDP in general. Same thing, if you have, and healthy here could be in terms of what do they eat, the nutrition bit, also well educated and aware and able to communicate the conversation of the day, which is education, and then also ties in with healthcare as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Thank you. Also, I just feel like in healthcare, we need to innovate to be able to improve the access. And it is a right? We all as humans have the right for good health. And the more we innovate and the better we are at like reaching that healthcare for all, the better.
Yeah. The challenge with healthcare is that we usually accuse that we are the laggards of innovation. We don't like to catch up. It's just that they're life and death, literally life and death risks here. So that innovation is a bit more guided, a bit more monitored for obvious reason. That does not mean that there's no opportunity to innovate. And I mean, even when you're coming out of a situation where we had the cases like COVID-19, it's just getting to see that you do need to see how you prepare a more resilient ecosystem from a healthcare point of view globally, and that you need to keep updated because the disease patterns, they change. Now, maybe the human body, the anatomy, the basics of it might not change as much over time, but how we respond to it and to how the environment also changes, and that changes, that we need to find a way we innovate. But there'll always definitely be tougher checks and balances for healthcare because there is a life and death risk to it.
Totally agree with you. Wonderful. Beatrice, we are running out of time, but before finishing, I would like to ask you two questions. And one is like, what keeps you motivated to do the work that you do?
I'm a healthcare practitioner. I've always been one. Patients do. And just getting to ensure that I don't think people should really die because of lack of access to healthcare. Now, how that is provided, that's where the challenges are. The models are different. But for me, just having healthy people, and so they're healthy enough to do the things that make them happy. Life should be lived, and I think healthcare does contribute. If you're in good health, then you're able, hopefully, to actually enjoy your life better and contribute to this whole innovation discussion better as well.
Perfect. And do you have any parting advice for new or aspiring social entrepreneurs who are watching us live today?
I think be consistent, be curious, be courageous, and keep working on the content. It's a big word, but it's in everyday. It's in our way of life. Like I was telling you, Natalie, when we were having a conversation earlier, I think because I grew up in Africa, innovation is our way of life. You have to. It's a way of life. You're looking for things to do that makes what you do today better. And I think just that communal networking is also part of the culture. So I hope those are things that we can pick from where life finds us and where we have, let's say, what has been part of our journey, where we were born, where we work, what we do, that we bring that together and we're able to just push the needle in terms of what we do, whether it's a scientific, what's it, just the simple things, our everyday life, and even what it is that we do when we bring it to work.
Totally. Thank you so much, Beatrice. It's been really great to have you here today on our first live webinar of the course, to have everybody inspired with your words and your experience. Thank you so much, Beatrice.
Thank you so much for the invite, and all the best with the entire course to all the participants. Thank you for making time to join us today.
Wonderful. And thank you everyone also for watching us live today, for being together with us. And I would like to remind you that we have the second live webinar on April 27th with our guest expert, Sarah Said Kuram, to discuss entrepreneurial challenges and opportunities. So thank you so much everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.